bells ringing.
These bells rang for 4 minutes, 1 minute for each century since the start of slavery in the United States. The first enslaved Africans landed here at Fort Monroe, known back then as Point Comfort, marking the beginning of 246 years of human trafficking. Most of today's African Americans are descendants of these slaves and make up nearly 15% of the U.S. population. Hundreds of them turned up that day to remember a moment in history that defines their identity.
It was important for me and, of course, to bring my son here as well because, once again, as I mentioned, to grow up and live around it. And I know the history of what my ancestors went through and accomplished and achieved is something that all of our kids, and as well as any one of us with that ancestry need to be made aware of since it was something that was kept from us, for so long.
For the mayor of Hampton, commemorating the beginning of slavery helps appreciate how far the U.S. has come.
I would say to a 12-year-old Black American today that there is tremendous opportunity, that you just need to keep pressing forward, that you came from a people who had the strength and resilience and perseverance to survive the most brutal treatments that anybody could imagine, and yet we have numbers of individuals who are elected officials. We have people involved in business, research, you name the career field, we are involved in it. And no one probably could have imagined that 400 years ago.
Congress established a special commission tasked with highlighting 400 years of African American history. Politically, the message is to learn from the past to move society forward.
On this day, I reflect on the horrors that denied the humanity of so many millions of God's children. And we welcome the unquestionable spirit of dignity, resilience, and strength of a people whose freedom heralded a new birth of freedom for our entire nation. If we are going to go forward to include the future, we must acknowledge the past. Here in America, we rededicate ourselves as a nation and as a people to our ongoing pursuit of a more perfect union with liberty and justice, justice, justice for all.
But the ideal of unity is challenged by the reality of a society still very much divided along racial lines. Historically, Black colleges and universities, known as HBCUs, are one example. Created by and for African Americans at a time when they were banned from attending white colleges because of segregation, HBCUs are now officially open to everyone, but are still almost exclusively attended by Black students. In this class on the history of slavery and reparation at Howard University in Washington, D.C., the message is one of us versus them.
They started calling us lazy after we stopped working for free, and it came from Black people wanting their own autonomy and wanting to be self-sufficient and buying and working on their own land. And at the minute that we stopped working on white land for white landowners, is that the minute that we started to become called lazy, something that's still happening right now, 2019.
People of African descent and Black people in this country are denied very often the right to vote. They have less access to education, less access to health care. They are also the population that is largely represented in the prison system. In addition to that, also victims of police violence. Then this is what we are today. The legacies of this period still can be perceived today.
Lene is from Mississippi, Anissa from Brooklyn, and Lauren from Alabama. These young women say they chose to study at an HBCU to learn more about their roots, but also to avoid discrimination. For this new generation, African American identity is still very much a work in progress.
Not knowing where your ancestors are from, not knowing where your last name, that's a huge repercussion for a lot of us. We talk about immigrants, we talk about immigration, but forced migration of Blacks is something that needs to be taught and it needs to be expounded upon.
Whenever I think about reparations and I think about where I want this all to go, I try to keep in mind the people that came before me and what my ancestors probably wanted whenever they wanted reparations. And I think what they wanted most was to go home. But unfortunately, I don't think that we have a home to return to. But I feel that so long as we're alive, we can make one somewhere.
Slavery is what built America. Slavery is what built that's all that's around us right now. It is the foundation of capitalism here in America. The history of slavery and the effects of slavery are still very much alive today.
400 years after those first African slaves set foot on U.S. soil, slavery and segregation have been abolished, but the wounds of the past have yet to be fully healed.